Welcome to Open for Small Business, the podcast that celebrates the grit, determination, and resilience of small business owners and experts. We dive into the real stories behind running a business, from the big wins to the tough lessons, with candid conversations from those who've lived it. I'm your host, Bridget Snelling, Country Manager for Xero in Aotearoa, New Zealand. We're open for small business. Kia ora and welcome to Open for Small Business. Thanks for joining us today. I am so excited to have in the studio with me two of my favourite humans, Josh and Helen Emett. Most of you will know Josh Emett as a famous chef and judge on MasterChef, and now Josh and Helen are a power couple with the Emett Group and a number of restaurants. We're very lucky to have them here in the studio with us today. So thanks for joining me, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We'll kick into it. I mean, obviously, I think Josh is well known from coming back to New Zealand many years ago and being a judge on MasterChef was probably the first time Kiwis would have really got to know Josh. And in more recent years, obviously, you two being a very powerful couple in the hospitality scene, restaurateurs with some of your amazing restaurants, my personal favourite, the Oyster Inn on Waiheke, but also Onslow and Guilt being two other favourite restaurants here in Auckland. So let's just start at the very beginning for anyone listening who doesn't know your backstory. Josh, how did you get into cooking and becoming a chef? Like, where did that start for you?
Well, it started from a upbringing on a farm where I cooked from a really young age. I cooked from probably 6-7 years old. I did one proof of the pudding, I think, is that on my 13th birthday, my grandmother gave me a cookbook, not a whatever else kids
not
got.
Lego.
Not Lego. No. I got the radio and.
She must have seen some talent in you, maybe.
Totally, cake baking talent, maybe more than anything else. Because I used to bake a lot of cakes. I did a huge amount of bacon. I used to make myself breakfast in the morning. 4 eggs on toast and sausages and bacon, proper farmer's breakfast. But I always had a love of cooking and a love of food, a love of eating, and I think that's where that path started. Going through school, I didn't enjoy school too much. And when I was leaving school, I really wanted to do something. I actually wanted to do something outdoors. I wanted to work in coming from a farm.
Yeah.
I had this dream of being a ranger, although I don't really know. I don't think I ever knew what a ranger was or what they did. But I knew I didn't want to work behind a desk. I knew I didn't want to sort of wear a suit to work, even though I like wearing beautiful clothes and all that sort of carry on. So cooking was the angle that I went down. We actually went through a Waikato Polytechnic brochure and sort of laid it out on the kitchen table. And, I'd had a couple of struggle years at school where I just messed around. And we went through all the courses and the only one my marks qualified for was cooking. So I thought, well, that's me. But I had been working from the age of 15 in an old people's home, and I would go there from 5 to 7 most nights of the week, Monday to Friday definitely, and then on the weekends, and wash dishes, cook. There was mostly old ladies in that home. Go and cook them dinner.
Oh, I bet they loved this young boy coming and serving them dinner.
Oh, I had curly hair and I loved my curls. It was embarrassing,
A bit like the hair of these days that our boys have got, the thing in the back.
Sort of the mullet and, lots of curls. So they loved that. And we would go down there, reheat the food and chat and then clean up and then go back. And that was probably my introduction into, cooking. And then... Waikato Polytechnic course, into it, and then got out of New Zealand as quick as possible and moved to the UK.
I think I need to interject slightly. It was actually a very fun place to work, wasn't it? Because there was a lot of young people your age.
The retirement home. Yeah, it was. Yeah,
and
it was
he had
great.
the best car in his friend group because he made so much money.
Well, I just think that's amazing discipline. And, we'll get to this, but obviously being a chef, you need discipline. And, we're a better place to learn discipline than working with very demanding, older people and from such a young age, turning up, washing dishes. That's great mahi.
Well, no, I know. And embarrassingly, I even had to shower some old people and all sorts of stuff. I mean, I got roped into sort of all cleaning up sick and doing stuff that you just don't want to do.
Especially when I was a teenage boy.
We have, there was some stuff that we did in there that was just like, God, that's terrible. I can't imagine my boys dealing with it.
Weirdly, I too have worked. We're going totally off piece here, but I worked in a retirement home also because my father was a medical director at a rest home for years, and I understand exactly what you're saying, and it is actually quite good work for a young person. But we digress.
But I think it's a sort of question that I ask at interview, like, what's the worst job you've ever done? And if you haven't, you almost like, I don't want you working for me. Because everyone's done a bad job. Like I remember my first job was in hospo, and I used to like clean. My mum would come and pick me up, and I was like mopping kitchen floors, But I just wanted the money. Like I was driven by like how much I was going to get in my bank account,
My first job also was actually I don't know if it was my first, but I was at Michelin-star having dinner one night with some friends. I might have been 15 or 16, and I said, I would like a job, and they're like, okay, sure. I turned up. And they put me on drinks to start with. First night, spilt red wine on someone. Never graduated from drinks to food and quit after 6 weeks. I was like, I want to be being served, not serving other people. I had no talent. I had no talent for waitressing, unfortunately. Anyway, so you went overseas and interestingly, somehow you ended up working for Gordon Ramsay.
Yeah, that was, I spent my first 2 years in the UK. Then I let my visa run out, long story, had to move back somewhere, and I moved to Australia and worked. Actually, at that point, I was working for a friend of Gordon Ramsay's. Then I worked for another friend of Gordon Ramsay's in Australia. Amazing chef. Worked for him for 3 years, him and his wife, and then went back up to the UK. I was just dying to get back into the UK. So at that point, I was 26 years old. I had been cooking for 6 or 7 years. I was a well-oiled machine, I would say. I'd had 3 incredibly tough years in Australia. The Donovan and Philippa, who I worked for down there, were
ball breakers.
Just tough, super tough.
Tough but great. Like I learned so much. That was just an absolute. It was an amazing experience. And then back up to the UK and started working for Gordon, and that was pretty life changing as well.
Is he as tough as he seems? Hell's Kitchen.
Just brilliant. No, I mean, as the story goes, I went back into the UK. And with the objective to work in his kitchen, and he had just been on a show called Britain's Worst Bosses, and it was sort of hilarious. And it had just been voted one of the worst places to work in the UK, and I went,
and he thrived.
And I went, and it was just glorious.
So that old people's home? This is why I loved it.
It took me about 6 weeks to fit in. I had a pivotal moment, call it, where I had a colossal argument with one of the guys that had been working for him already for about 4 years, and that was
what was it over?
It was over some. To be honest, I think it was over some overcooked green beans that he supplied to my sex. Something petty, but it had been building, and when it blew, and everyone sort of stood back and watched, and then everything settled down after that.
Is it? So I mean, as I said, I've never had any talent for hospo, so don't know anything about this. But in a kitchen, is it a bit like a pack of dogs? Like there's a pecking order.
It's like the army.
It is. There's a hierarchy. There's a very strict hierarchy. Yeah.
So did you break the hierarchy when you had that argument?
Oh, 100%.
Did it push you up?
Yeah. 100%.
But it also meant that he didn't get picked on. Like, so in other words, he asserted his power, but it's the dog mentality. Yeah. You're not going to he stood up for himself.
Yeah.
But I think there is an element as well, as you're talking about this, and you'll understand this, we've got kids the similar age, but doing that history piece of like Kiwis going overseas to the war, right? And then what they did in the war and their different mindset. I think there is that Kiwi mentality. And the reason you probably survived in those kitchens is because you had that resourcefulness. You probably started work, you had that
discipline,
grandparent attitude.
Yeah.
And I think that always just plays on my mind that was probably the reason that you did have that experience in the Gordon Ramsay
Well, a
kitchen.
differentiator, right? Like I think that's what's really interesting about Kiwis that do so well overseas is, and people say it, you bring something different, in a different mindset, work ethic, whatever it is.
I was a great soldier. I was well behaved. I worked hard. I didn't really care how many hours I worked. I didn't really care how much I got paid. I was obsessed about learning, getting better as a chef, and I loved cooking. And I love learning about the restaurant business. So that was ticking my boxes. Anything else I wasn't really bothered about. So in that respect, it was the right place for me. And it was very, very focused on food and service. It wasn't it wasn't necessarily the Wild West in there. It was a very professionally run kitchen, but it was just hard,
Hard work. So at what point did you decide you wanted to come back to New Zealand? So how did you get back here?
Well, in between, working for Gordon, I went out to New York and opened Gordon's restaurants out in New York, Los Angeles. This was after many years in the UK. I worked for him for about 11 years in total.
Wow, it's a long time.
Got incredible opportunities, which I like I sort of just said, I just dove into everything, all the challenges that were put in front of me, and really excelled in his organisation. And I started when there was one restaurant and left in there. I think there was 22.
Wow, amazing.
Stretched across the world, and I'd been a large part of lots of that path. And then, that finished up when I was eventually down in Australia, and, we parted ways, and I always knew it was probably going to be messy when we did part ways, and it wasn't too bad. I think I always had a goal of when I did leave, I wanted to leave on good terms.
Yeah, of course. And,
I think we largely did that, I think I had seven incredible years and probably 5 tough or 4 tough with him, I came out of that and was in limbo. We were in limbo for about a year with young kids and that sort of thing. But we always had a goal to open our own restaurants.
Yeah. But, okay, I want to go back to how you two met because, I think Josh you're obviously like the chef and I don't want to call you the woman behind the man, Helen, because you are more than that. But you're an amazing team, a restaurateur team. And it can't be easy working with your beloved. I definitely couldn't work with mine. So let's go back to how you met because you met in the States, didn't you?
Yep.
We met in New York.
Okay, give me the clean version of that meeting.
So I was going to say the one we can tell. I'd moved to New York from the UK. I'm obviously English. Hopefully that's still.
You definitely still sound English.
Still sound English.
Haven't got a Kiwi accent just yet.
No Kiwi accent. And I had moved to New York with Merrill Lynch. I got an opportunity. It coincided with my marriage breaking up. I wanted a new beginning, and I thought New York would be a place to do it. So I moved there, and there was a guy on my floor who had come over from the London office that was a Kiwi. And so he and I became really good friends. We used to run kind of at lunchtime together, and then through him, I went to watch a rugby match one Saturday, and I met Josh.
Watching or playing?
All Blacks. Watching the All Blacks.
Yeah, actually,
I can't remember who they were playing, but it was of course it was an All Blacks game in a Kiwi flat in New York.
It was like a 11 o'clock kind of catch up for this guy's birthday, and Josh was there, and I sort of turned up hungover and wore my glasses in their apartment. I remember these cringy things that I did. And then I was sort of horribly hungover and just quaffing champagne. And then eventually I had this conversation with Josh, and Josh was there with his girlfriend. And I was talking loudly to everyone, as you probably can imagine, about how I was about to cook for 20 people because I'd just done a course at the French Culinary Institute in Soho in New York, in Manhattan. And I was showing off a bit, and someone was like, "Oh, well, Josh is a chef." And I was like, "Oh, cute. He probably works in a sort of bistro on the Lower East Side." And I was sort of just going to sort of patronise him. And then he sort of told me that he worked for Gordon Ramsay and just achieved 2 Michelin-stars. So I was like, "Oh, can we talk about that?" And we ended up sort of talking. And then we were good Kiwi style. We decided to play a game once the rugby was finished, and we played Pictionary. And we were because we were sitting next to her at that time, we were about to be in a team together. And suddenly our friend was like, "Oh my God, no, split them up, put Josh back with his girlfriend. Helen sits on this side of the table." And then I had to go off because I was actually cooking for these group of friends of mine. And I kind of thought that was it. He was taken, if you like. And then I had a party in the December, and I'd invited my mate from work. And as I was getting ready, and I'd kind of gone over the top with what I was cooking, and I was regretting it, Damien said to me, "Oh, look, my mate's kind of he's got nothing to do. Can I invite him?" And I was panicking about numbers, who was going to turn up. So I was like, yeah, whoever, just invite anyone. And it was Josh. And at that point, he told me that he'd split up with his girlfriend. So I was like, "Oh my God." And I was like, "What am I wearing?" I hadn't even brushed my hair. And I didn't make any sort of effort. And then Josh turned up with the with the ex-girlfriend or the girlfriend. So I was a bit confused by that, but distracted with the cooking. And again, thought nothing of it. Little did I know, Josh had already kind of made a beeline agenda that he was going to take me out on a date at some point. And then I went back to Europe for Christmas. And when I got back, he'd given me his business card, and I think we'd exchanged an email or something. And I was like, look, I'm going to Europe, but I'd love to catch up when I get back. And it was more to do with me going to see his kitchen rather than a date. And I just was desperate to see like a professional kitchen. And literally within 1 hour of being back at my desk, I got a text to say, did I want to go out for, dinner or lunch? And I was like, oh my God. So I put everything down on my desk and ran to Damien's office, had a cup of tea and was like, what am I going to do? And I was like, do I do Saturday night or Sunday lunch? He was like, oh my God, Saturday night. And
Sunday lunch.
I know. So we went out on the Saturday night, and it really is a case of like,
love at first sight.
Well, it was just like, we had the date, which was amazing. And then I kind of want to say that like a week later, I had the keys to his apartment. And then 6 months later, we bought our first house. And 7 months later, we were pregnant with
whirlwind.
Finn. I mean,
romance.
And now we were figuring this out the other day, but because Josh will always say we've been together for 12 years, but Finn's 16. And I'm like, there is a 9 month. There is a 9
that's
month.
not quite right.
But anyway,
Maths doesn't add up.
It's 17 and a half years that we've been together. And we haven't done everything in, like you say, the normal way. But we did come into this with quite a lot of, like, things that we'd done wrong with our relationships. So I think after about 2 or 3 dates, we were just like, okay, what do you want? Because I was like, look, I'm fast tracking now. I'm running out of time. Let me have a conversation. What do you actually want? Because if you want a 3rd Michelin-star, I'm not in. Because I do not want to be like, never seeing you and, And he was like, no, I want to have kids and get married. And I was like, okay then, perfect.
Okay, I could talk forever about that. This is the cutest story. And I think it speaks to why you're such a great team when it comes to your business, because you obviously have that just amazing connection, respect for each other. You can, you're not a chef, Helen, but you're an amazing cook. So you can Josh has huge respect for you on that front as well. So let's talk about how you came back to New Zealand, MasterChef judge when I first came across you, and then you started opening your own kitchens and your own restaurants. So how did you first of all decide that you knew you could work together? Because that's a big thing for a couple to do and to get into business together.
I think we need to just add just one little bit in between that segue is the fact that when Josh did have the breakup with Gordon, we had everything on a container to London for a job under the Gordon Ramsay Group, for an international role that was going to be based out of London.
Okay.
I had a 4-week-old baby, and we weren't...
And an 18-month-old.
And an 18-month, yeah. And we had everything moving back to London, but then we had no job and everything moving back to London. And so we had a year in London where we were like, what are we going to do?
Okay.
And it was at that point that Josh got this opportunity to do more New Zealand MasterChef. And he then started having conversation with his business partner then, who he opened Rata with. So then So
Rata was the first restaurant.
Rata was the first. And we were living in London. I had 2 kids under 2. And Josh was living between New Zealand and London.
Oh.
So it was a really...
Very hard.
Yeah, really, really hard time.
And Dad had just passed away from cancer, so he had just been going. So everything was going on within a 6-month period.
Yeah,
it was full
and
on.
I went back to work because Josh was trying to look at these kind of like developing his own thing, which meant that he didn't want to jump into a job as such.
Of course, yeah.
So I had an au pair. It was a very, very strange time. And my sister had moved to New Zealand. Very random segue. So my mum was in New Zealand, Josh was in New Zealand, and I was living in London going, what am I doing? Yeah. So that was the bit in between. Just because I think it's, otherwise, I suppose it's
quite
the crazy
compelling
story.
to come back to New Zealand when you've already got family.
Yeah.
here and
it
you're
just
from.
made sense after a point in time where it's like, well, let's just base ourselves out of New Zealand. We never actually intended to live in New Zealand. It was just not on the cards. But we were doing, we started, because we were living in Australia, and we started doing MasterChef New Zealand, and that anchored me to New Zealand. And then, I thought, okay, well, I'll open a restaurant in Queenstown. Was the goal, and we did that with a business partner, and then went on to open sort of 9 more restaurants across that group over 8 or 9 years.
Yeah.
And Helen was always behind the scenes, in a pretty heavy supporting role, even though you were looking after the kids and, being a mother. We talked about everything regarding restaurants. We always have, right? We just talk about ideas, recipes, this, that, what's good, what's bad. We have a shared love of what makes a great restaurant, and we're very much on the same page in respect to that. So when we came to probably pre-COVID, we decided we'd separate off and open our own businesses up here in Auckland rather than sort of transiting down to Queenstown. That's what we did.
Was the oyster in the first up here?
It ended up being the first, but it wasn't supposed to be like that.
Right.
So Onslow, we were in the process of opening Onslow. We had the site signed. We were building that, and all of a sudden the building works got delayed, which is pretty normal because it was a whole residential building they were building. And then Oyster Inn got sort of dropped in our laps, and we knew the ex-owners who had sold it previously, Jonathan and Andrew. Right. So we sort of had a quick chat to them about it, and then it sort of went away. And about 3 months later, it just got dropped back in our laps again. And this time we were like, okay, let's have, our other project's been delayed. Let's have a crack at this. And we rang them up and said, listen, we'll do it, but we want you to just come alongside us on that sort of journey and help us get it back to where it was, when you guys owned it. And that's what we did.
Nice.
And so we opened that 4 weeks before sort of COVID and that massive lockdown, first lockdown we took over on Valentine's Day, February the 14th.
Oh gosh, just like a month or 6 weeks prior.
2020, yeah.
Our anniversary is the 13th as well, so we sort of had a night there. It was kind of surreal. It
was carnage. And then Onslow ended up opening of October that year. So probably a year delayed. So that's how it ended up panning out.
And so getting into the business side of things, because, you're a chef, you've got obviously, great experience having worked at Merrill Lynch and in other roles. How did you figure out how to actually run a business? Because it's, it's different. It's all the business stuff on top of actually being an amazing chef. And you knew how to run a kitchen, but running a business is kind of next level. So how did you learn that, or how did you have the confidence to take on that?
Well, I think I've always had I always knew my goal was to open my own businesses. So I did always have an approach that, I'm a chef led, right? So, and so many chefs go on to open their own businesses, and lots just don't want to take care of that business side of things. I love the business side of things. I love the design and build of restaurants. I love the, the day-to-day running of them. I probably my systems and processes is possibly more Helen, because she's more of that mindset. But
I don't think you've ever said that before, systems and processes. You always tell me you're the systems and process person.
I think I'm very rigid in the kitchen. I'm extremely rigid in how we run our kitchens, but and probably the businesses. The tech behind the scenes. You're the tech person, right?
You're like, am I systems and processes?
No, I know.
The supporting tech, you're great at that.
Yeah, and I also think that, you touched on a point, like working for a large organisation like Merrill Lynch, writing minutes and agendas and structures and, putting in meeting requests. A lot of hospitality businesses don't run like that, because naturally people are progressing through the ranks and they've never seen what a large corporation, operates like. And so kind of I came in with that different mindset and that questioning mindset, like, why do we do it? Why do you do it like that? And interestingly enough, we do have a guy that works with us who is a business solutions guy. He actually runs as a consultant and still does to this day. Funnily enough, quite a nice segue from a zero point of view. He literally came to set up our zero. He's just works for our investor, our shareholder, and he was asked just to come in and help us out on a project, and he's never left.
Oh, I love that. Zero expert, zero champion.
Zero champion. But so he kind of came to set up that sort of infrastructure side of things, but he also has got no hospitality experience. So he and I will often sit in meetings and go, "Why? But why?" You know, often that is the thing that we say, but why? And so I have been the person that's come in and questioned a lot of things and, you know, asked why we do things. But, you know, do either of us have any idea how to run a small business? No. I think it's a little bit like when you have a child and someone says, you know, how do you do it? And I think if you were handed a fully walking, you know, eating, you know, full-blown child, you would be really stumped. But because you're given this baby that can only lie and cry and, you know.
And you grow with it.
You grow with it. And I think that's what we did. There are some things that, you know, we look back on and think, was that deliberate? And I think if I'm really honest, no, some of these things just happened. You know, we looked at it and then it happened because we were at that point of growth that we needed to, we talked about this before, get an HR manager, not have, you know, the chef and the restaurant manager creating contracts all a little bit differently.
Yeah,
not
so
controlled.
Systems and processes.
Yeah. And then, you know, the day that we decided that we needed an office, you know, like that was a big moment. But it was almost like because we literally couldn't do what we were doing anymore, which was actually working in a cafe of a building in the CBD. They had a cafe that no one used. And before you know it, we took out like... There was 9 of us.
Like Top Cat living out of
I know. And the thing is, they actually had USB charged plugs under this like bank. It was like I could put my laptop in there. But it got to the point that we didn't actually want to eat and drink there, but we felt that we needed to. But they did sparkling water, and we were like, "This is so good," you know. We won't reveal which place, but there'll be people that know that we did that for like little parasites for a while. But then, you know, like it's actually interesting as well because then you start acquiring people within your group that start saying, like, "We need to get an office." And I think if I'd said to Josh, "I think we need to get an office," he'd be like, "No, you don't." But because someone else had said, "Look, this seems a bit ridiculous. We can't print things. We can't, you know, we don't have a meeting room."
You can't work out of the restaurants, right? So
no,
you know, we don't have office space. You can't be visibly working in the restaurants when they're open for lunch or for dinner. You know, you've just got to get out of there because it's just a bad look and it's just something we don't do.
We sometimes do.
But I think going back to previous to us deciding we're opening restaurants together and we know what. We sort of have a shared vision of what great looks like, what great restaurants should look and feel like.
You know what the end result needs to be.
100%. And then from a commercial sense, you know, I know what our rent percentage should be and I know what our base cost structure and all that sort of thing should be. And then there's, you know, food cost, beverage cost, and wage cost, which are the variables. Wage cost is really variable. That's a cost that you have to work really hard to get control of. But we were in complete agreement that we need to do things differently, that the hospitality model, as I had worked in for 35 years, is probably a little bit broken, you know, and there was so many things that I've grown up with in the hospitality industry that I disagreed with people being pushed into management positions that they're not ready for and they don't understand the commercial terms of running a restaurant, yet they get pushed into running a restaurant and they're not really, unfortunately not capable and then frustrated and angry and, you know, this is what happens. You know, it happens in lots of industries. But Helen being the curious person that she is, and both of us saying, well, we just need to do things differently. And that's what we did. We binned everything that we sort of felt like we knew. And it's like, for me personally, it's like I'm the old dog and having to learn new tricks because and be okay with that, even though I'm, you know, you're like, well, that's just the way we've done it. Yeah. That's not okay. And Helen being really curious and questioning everything and saying, why do we do it like that? No, we want to do it like that. And that's challenging, right? And that's been really challenging over the years to just look at things differently. But I think that's part of the reason we have been successful.
And I love that because I think, you know, like hospitality is probably one of the oldest industries of all time, you know, and actually looking at it and thinking, how can we improve this model? How can we be more efficient? How can we be more creative? So I think that's something I noticed in your restaurants as well is there's creativity, not just in the menu, but in the decor and the service. It's a different experience to other restaurants.
Yeah.
And it's not only a want to do things differently. I think it's a critical need to do things differently because so much it's well publicized. Everything's changed.
Absolutely.
We need to wake up and just change the way we operate our businesses.
So that's actually a really great segue into just talking about hospitality as an industry, because we know in the Zero Small Business Insights data that we've seen that hospitality over the past couple of years has been an industry that's really struggled. Obviously through COVID, it was dire, but even in more recent times, out of all the sectors, hospitality is one that's struggled. Now we can think, well, obviously cost of living's high, people don't have as much discretionary spending. Perhaps that's one of the reasons. But then, if you go to a really good restaurant like one of yours, often they are still super busy. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's now, first of all, just your thoughts on hospitality as an industry, like what it's like in New Zealand, what you've noticed in the time you've been back and opening restaurants in terms of the industry? Are other people like you thinking about doing things better? Or do you feel like you've kind of pushed the boat out more than others?
I mean, I think it's interesting because if you look at the industry, and it's not just New Zealand, it's across the world, there is no other industry where people will go, I'm going to open a business and spend $500,000 on a fit out. And that could be for a cafe, right? No one does that, it's and then does that with no credentials. No understanding of how to run a business. And so the number of people we've spoken to that have basically gone, or at least if, a simple thing to do is look back at people that have run awards in the last, say, 5 years. So you win the award for the best new restaurant, and then a year and a half later, you cease trading. So they're cooking great food, but that doesn't make a great restaurant.
It's not enough.
It's not the only element. You need to run a business. And I think that's where people just see that, oh my God, I've got a great logo, I've got the menu, and I can cook well, and I'll now get someone to throw in, $500,000 to do it. They've got no idea like how long it will take to pay back that investment, and then what that looks like from a margin point of view, what looks like that staff cost point of view, or, like that rent side of things, like the number of people that will say as well, I've just secured a site on the Ponsonby Road. And we're like, what is your rent basis? You won't have the formula there. And so we've actually looked at it rather than always with the passion and the love. We've gone, before we've actually taken a project on, does the maths work? And if the maths works, then we can start looking at the creative side, and then we can start looking at what we want to do next.
I think talking about our two sites, the Onslow site, Oyster Inn's different. Oyster Inn's, it's just an iconic site sitting where it sits in Aotearoa. It's just gorgeous. It's been a restaurant for probably 40 years. But, when we took Onslow site, 4 or 5 operators had looked at that site and turned it down. And when we said we were going in, people were like, you're taking that on. And then, the same when we took on the site for Guilt, we were looking for spaces that we see something in that no one else sees what we see, where we can see something that we have a vision and we see what it could look like. We love Princes Street. We love that centre of the city and actually those two sites are completely interlinked because we were looking at the Guilt site before Onslow site was offered to us.
It was the only other site we were about to push go.
And I was in mid negotiations, and then I went up the hill and got what I thought. I got a better deal, I got a better intro and a better everything with the site up there, and I was having a tough time down below, and then in 4 years' time, 3 years' time, that site dropped back in our laps again, and it was still empty.
And they're both, for anyone listening who's not from Auckland, when you come, you must visit these restaurants because they are both beautifully done. I mean, the interiors are gorgeous. I personally love walking through that very shishi apartment building into Onslow. It immediately sets the tone for the experience you're going to receive at Onslow. And same at Guilt. It feels like, I'm a big lover of France, as you both know. You feel like you're in a French bistro when you walk into Guilt.
Yeah.
And it's quite, it's quite unique in the CBD. There's really nothing else like it.
Yeah, 100%. And so when we approached these businesses, one of the things that Helen and I were really agreed on is that we would food and service is something that we do and should be a given that it's excellent, beyond excellent, delivered to a level. So we have focused quite hard on the back end of the business and the financial model of the business and making everything work, because without that, you don't have a business.
No, that's right.
And that's, to Helen's point before, you've got no business unless you sort your back end out. And we've got a responsibility of 130 staff that we pay and support their livelihoods, not only theirs but our own. And that's a huge responsibility. So, but food and service is what we've done for years. Of course, it should be good. Of course,
Absolutely, but I mean, so I was going to ask you about stuff. So 130 staff. I mean, that's a lot of people. And in hospitality, what I imagine is you've got people who are coming and going. They're not necessarily all full time. Particularly at Oyster, and you probably have seasonal workers, I imagine. So how do you manage that? Because people can be the best and worst part of any business. You have to deal with their challenges. How do you? So which one of you is sort of leans in more to the people side of things? Is that you?
You'd think it was, but Josh does quite a lot on the people side as well. So he does do quite a lot with the human resources, our human resources manager. I would get more involved in, say, the contracts, making sure that we're, the onboarding process and those sorts of things with the HR side of things. But we've also got to the point that we go, if we've hired someone for the role, we need to pass that off and let people, delegate. Otherwise, I think we do both have a tendency to want to control things. But I think we both do it to a certain extent. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, we're definitely both involved in every aspect of the businesses. I think I from an HR point of view, I'm managing all those teams. I think I've been sort of obsessed with being a great manager or a great leader since I was thrust into a position I wasn't ready for at sort of 27, 28 years old, all those years ago, where and I handled myself really badly at times and had to figure out how to make this whole machine work and keep my team on board and motivate them and inspire them and do all those things and learn on the job a little bit, because you're not taught that. That's the problem. One of the big issues with our industry is people just get thrust into positions they're not ready for.
Yeah. And I think the other thing as well to mention, a little bit, again, bringing that sort of parenting analogy into it, am I a good mother? Am I doing a good job? Question. So when you're looking at that from running a business, there are moments when I'm like, am I a good leader? Am I a good manager? Am I a good this? I don't think when you say, what's it like to have that many people, that does give me anxiety. I don't like the idea of leading a team that is that big. Nor do I actually think sometimes I'm actually very good at running and leading teams of that size. You and I have had conversations oh my God, team management.
It's a lot. Yeah.
It's hard. And I don't necessarily think that sometimes I'm actually that good at it. If, for example, if there was a GM role coming in, I'd be quite happy to hand off those people management side of things. There's other parts of the job that I really enjoy. And I don't necessarily think I do love saying that I lead that number of people, because I sometimes think that I lack that management and leadership skills. I think you're great with people, though. I disagree. I think you're great with people, and I think you're great having hard conversations, particularly when you're having those conversations and you are very well prepared. And I'm unfortunately quite blunt, and Helen softens all those edges with and is way more articulate and approaches things in such a professional way sometimes, I think, when and does such a better job at that than me.
I can imagine you're being very hard on yourself.
Or, and actually, funnily enough, being here on a podcast, I am a prolific podcast listener, and I think that's where I kind of, when I am questioning what I need to do, I will often lean into podcasts that help you develop. And I'm listening to that sort of things, how do you deal with difficult situations? And actually, you should be very upfront. I want to have a sit-down conversation with you, and this is what I want to talk to you about. And I want to hear from your side of things, so that you're actually kind of you're not kind of pussyfooting around about what we're talking about. You're being very upfront with the person, because if not, it can feel super awkward.
Totally.
Yeah.
This is a good segue also onto tech because a lot of people are using AI to help with things like difficult conversations with employees, relationship advice, business advice, and
how to write a text to somebody about,
Yeah, exactly. And it's a little bit concerning because what we're learning about AI is, the response is probably only as good as the prompt you're putting in.
Yeah.
But when it comes to your business, so to AI, one part of it, but what have you noticed over the years since you've started opening restaurants in terms of the technology and how it's helping you?
Oh. I mean, interestingly, and again, I've done a massive deep dive into podcasts within the hospitality sector, and they, over the last 5 years, it's changed dramatically. But from a solutions point of view, there isn't, like other industries, there isn't a sort of soup to nuts integration between the different silos of the business. So you've got a booking system, you've got a point of sale system, so that's where you put in your orders and you take payments from, and then you've got your Xero. There isn't really that full, and actually, sorry, the other thing as well is rostering and scheduling of staff hours.
Yeah.
Payroll. And then
it should be completely integrated, and it isn't. And most of the systems don't integrate properly with each other.
Right.
And then we're just on the cusp. Actually, the one message I got before I came into here is to speak to our POS guys because we're introducing a new booking system, but we soon will be able to integrate our scheduling system as well. Because if you're standing on the floor, which is a huge kind of, observation that I will make, I will go, okay, so it's 5:00, we've got 3 tables in and we've got 6 staff. But at 7:00, we'll have 6 staff and 40 tables in. So there is a big problem there with the scheduling because I'm actually paying a whole load of people. And we run a weekly meeting, which is run under the open book management methodology, which is where anybody in the business can attend. We do find that it is our sort of key team leaders, sort of head chefs, both front and back of house.
And these across all the restaurants? Everyone has the same meeting?
Yeah. And it's run in a really cool way. It's a structured agenda. And what we're looking at there is, one of the key things we'll be looking at there is wage costs, revenue, forecasts, spend per heads.
Great. So this is actually a commercial meeting that you have your head chefs involved in.
And
our teams get full financial sort of visibility, if you like, across how the business is performing. And they're incentivized on that as well.
And
with,
they have to lead it.
A bonus structure.
So
That's
they have
fantastic.
to lead the meeting. So you might take a new duty manager and say, right, we think you'd be really great for this. We'd love you for the next 3 months to run the huddle, is what we call it. And they have to start forecasting and budgeting. And they'll work with the restaurant manager and they'll take guidance from us if they need it. And then they will forecast the revenue for the next week. If they meet forecast, everyone receives a bonus. It's called a PIP, performance
Incentive program.
Yeah. And then the managers themselves also have a manager's PIP, which is basically if they keep their wage costs to a certain level, then they meet their targets. But going back to kind of why we do this is the fact that if we get everybody within the organisation to be on the same page, then it's far easier for us to lead our businesses and, get them to see the intricacies of how the business works. And also one of the questions that we do ask somebody is say, look, for every $1, how much do you think we take? Because I think they think sometimes because we are the owners of the business, we're sitting there just absolute fat cats,
cashed up.
They look at how much we're taking in revenue and they'd be like, Jesus, these guys are absolutely creaming it. But of course, margins are very, very tight.
Very tight.
And so what we say to them sometimes when we start with them is say, how much do you think it is on $1? And, we get all sorts of different responses. But the truth of the fact is, on a bad month, it could be 8 cents, right?
Bad month, it could be no sense.
No sense, yeah.
Terrible
Or
one.
backwards.
Or negative
Backwards.
sense.
Yeah.
8 cents is actually reasonable. Across hospitality, 8% would be a
Fair
reasonable
lot.
return.
Yeah.
But that's probably not where we want to be.
And you are, I mean, you're cutting edge, not just in the kitchen, but from a business point of view as well. You obviously, running such a huge machine. I mean, it's massive. And the intricacies, I mean, I cannot think of anything much more stressful than being a chef. I mean, just dealing with customers, real time. It's not even like you get the feedback and can sit on the email for a day. It's there, live, someone's unhappy. I mean, just nightmare.
Well, I'd love to look at the metrics of this, and I'll come back and talk about systems in a minute and what's improved. But like even with Xero, I wonder whether they go, crikey, hospitality is hard. Look at the lines of, invoices that are coming in. Like it is a very complicated business to run, whether it's mixers for drinks, limes,
so many supplies,
straws, napkins,
Tons of supplies.
and so many supplies, and then now overlay that with sustainability and where are you getting your supplies from? I mean, it's very, very complex.
Yeah.
I want to get to systems and processes, but I want to ask also, when you just think about your people, how do you celebrate success with your teams? Because hospo's hard; they're working long hours. Sometimes they're dealing with nasty, ungrateful people.
A lot.
And Kiwis generally, what we know is that we don't celebrate success all that well. We focus on the things that don't go so well, and as business owners, particularly SMEs, don't stop and actually celebrate wins. So what do you have rituals like? What do you do with your teams? How do you keep your staff? How do you celebrate
Going straight back to the huddle. So the
weekly meetings that we have. Yeah. So every Tuesday morning is Guilt, and Tuesday afternoon is Onslow, and then Thursdays is generally the Oyster Run.
But a big section in that is appreciations.
Right.
And we encourage we have a daily report that's sent round every single day for every restaurant at the end of each service. And we talk about appreciations there that then filter down to the weekly appreciations. And that is really to try and get everybody to acknowledge and appreciate every single person. So it's not just sort of going upwards. It's like, thanking someone for staying extra time. Someone wasn't feeling well. Someone else covered. One of our other restaurants came down during a busy service. That constant appreciating what people do. Also that rewards, not only do we celebrate when we reach our targets, but also we are sharing in a financial gain for the staff. And just going back to that PIP thing, is that it might be $1 per hour that you've worked, might be the split of the bonus, call it bonus. And that means if you work 40 hours, you're getting $40, which isn't a huge amount of money, but it does
But it adds up.
It adds up.
If you're getting paid $26 an hour, you get $27 an hour that week versus,
it adds up, and it's something, and not everyone does that, so it's a differentiator as well.
No, it's really big for, it's another couple of $100 a month. It pays for gym memberships, it pays for groceries, it pays for all sorts of stuff.
But the other thing I'm celebrating is what we try not to do is we try and avoid alcohol, because in the hospo industry there's this staffies is what you get at the end of your shift, so you can have a drink at the end of your shift. We've tried to dial that back, so we do have like moments when we do really, really well. We might have a glass of champagne with the team. We might even do that at the beginning of the shift, like at the briefing, just a small little glass to say, really, really great. We're really excited about today's event. Everybody, we want to toast, here's to a great upcoming event. And so what we don't want to do is always gear it around sort of alcohol. And then we do have we have our board meetings. And so that is an opportunity for us to sit down with our individual managers and talk about what their successes have been. So it's kind of a combination of one-to-one and sort of team gatherings.
Yeah, and the appreciations are circulated to the whole team. So people write in there things like, thanks to, Mikey and the KP who has kept the back of house so clean on Saturday when we had a huge lunch service and a huge dinner service. And thanks to someone else who brought in some donuts for the team because they were all hungry in the afternoon. They just needed some sugar. And, it's really lovely, sort of wholesome, pats on the backs.
And also, I don't know how anyone working in your kitchens is not like the size of a house because the food is just so good. And I I could not work in hospital. I'd be eating all
Oh my God.
the time.
I know. Well, actually, the funny thing is, people think that you do, but we're hungry a lot of the time.
Because you're too busy
we
to
would
eat.
never go into the kitchen and ask for a meal, because we can't interrupt their flow or their prep. There is staff meal every day at sort of 3 or 4 o'clock, but that doesn't sort of fit in with my schedule if I'm going to cook for the boys in the evening. But I mean, the other thing as well, we do, we have something called Code Red and Code Green in our weekly meeting, which is to do with external feedback. So interestingly, on the external feedback, we obviously really focus in on those greens, which is really positive feedback. But one of my huge tasks of every week is dealing with the reds, so the difficult situations. And there is a viewpoint that if someone is passionate enough to send a negative review, then you can flip that person. So they'll be equally as a good communicator with the good stuff. So they're just over communicators. So what I do is I spend a lot of time with them. I usually phone every single person.
That's not a weekly thing. That's a month. You probably get one a month that you might have to have.
No. But we communicate them weekly. Yeah. So if there is one that I deal with, then I will deal with the code reds, we call them, not code browns, which we'd know about. No, I'm joking.
Thank God, don't want one of those in a restaurant.
No. Thank God, no. We don't run a pool, thankfully. But so I deal with those. And the interesting thing is I sort of weirdly, I don't know whether it's because I did a psychology degree, but I kind of just realised that people want to tell me what the situation was.
They want to be heard.
And so I listen. I listen, and I, most of the time, say, I agree with everything you're saying, because I've been a customer. I am a customer for a lot of situations. So I'm like, that's not okay. I'm not going to make excuses. It's not good enough. How would you like me to resolve? This is how I would like to resolve it. Does this work for you? Most people just want to be heard. And I would say pretty much almost like I get a 10 out of 10, just people go, I can't believe that you called me to talk about this. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. And look, I'll be back.
You've converted them to lifelong fans.
Yeah, and they will actually talk about their dinner parties. You're not going to believe it. We didn't have a great experience at X restaurant, but do you know that Helen called me and she really kind of appreciated it, and she said it's not good enough. And and I say to them, like, we are really lucky. We get a lot of great feedback, but we are humans and we will make mistakes.
Of course.
And from the sounds of things, I'll say you had the nightmare of nightmares. You had 4 things that I would never want happen to anybody, and it happened to. Well, you're right. All 4 things happened to you, and sorry.
So that's just that customer service, which is so important, particularly when people are, they go in, and often it's it's a special occasion or it's a treat, and they really want to have an amazing experience, and sometimes maybe they're just having a bad day and it hasn't gone the way they wanted, and they just want to vent about it. So kudos to you for doing that, because I'm a pretty vocal customer at times, so shock horror, and it makes a difference when someone actually listens and gives you that feedback. Honestly, we could talk all day. I literally could sit here all day, and I know that we're over time and you guys have a busy day ahead of you. But my last question to you is for other people wanting to get into business, and it might be hospo, it might be something completely different. Any advice that you would impart? I mean, you've spoken with so much wisdom today, and I can hear so many gems that people will think, wow, you've shown such resilience, perseverance, creativity, problem solving. I mean, what you do just covers off all the bases of what you need in business in any industry. But what advice would you give someone wanting to start out in business, or someone who's in business and finding it tough right now? What would you tell them? Starting out is, you just have to start, and funnily enough, that is probably my weakness. I'm a procrastinator and Josh is a let's just get it done. And you don't need to start, you don't need to be 100% there. You just need to give something a go and give it and try, and then learn from what hasn't worked and adapt, and but I think if you don't try, then and also, we're in a time right now where you can get information. If you want to find information out, whether you've got AI or a search that you can put in there, the information's out there, and it wasn't there before. You can literally put those questions in saying, I have this goal. What would you say the next steps need to be if I want to achieve that? Absolutely. And I'm one of the people that I follow and listen to, he's probably not liked by everyone, is Gary Vaynerchuk, and he will say that you need to
stop living your life for the view of other people. So if you want to set your own business up, you might need to move 30 minutes out of town into a 1-bedroom apartment, sell your car and have 2 jobs to save the money up to get the deposit for the first thing you do, because that is what you need to do. You need to kind of put it in. You can't just wait for things to happen to you. So it's making sacrifices and giving it a go.
Yeah, and I think don't do it alone. I think so many people end up doing it alone where they, and that's not a financial thing. You might say, okay, I've got the money and I'm going to invest the money and I want to own 100% of my business, or I want a business partner that's going to contribute cash and give me 20% or take 20% of the business. But I think so many people maybe don't want to put other people out and call them and say, I need help. I'm about to embark on this. I'm investing my life savings. I would like an hour of your time, get 2 or 3 mentors around you, really, really important, and have lots of conversations. And maybe I'm a bit of an overthinker. I like to I go over and over and over and over things in my head before I do them to make sure I've made the right decision. And I personally do a thing of consciously leaving doors open. So I leave decisions till the last possible minute so I feel like I can make, other people call it procrastination, but
strategic decision making.
But it is. It's leave doors open so that you don't close them, so that you can make the right decision and leave it till the last minute. But I think you really need to rely on people around you that, and it could be your mate's father who is just, exceptional in business, and he's the last person you want to call a favor on, but you pick up the phone and say, I need an hour of your time and I just want you to listen to me and throw some advice on me on whether I'm actually in the ballpark or whether I'm missing the mark or because there's so much knowledge out there. And
absolutely, I think it's so lonely for business owners. If they don't know, if they don't have a good network or they don't know who to ask, and that's, I think you're right, Josh. Ask for help, especially surround yourself with people who have skills you don't have, and really make sure that you are testing what you think is right, not just going gung ho into it and spending $500,000 on a fit out without any understanding of commercials.
That's exactly what it is. It's so lonely at the top, sort of thing, by yourself doing these things. It really is. And if you've got good support around you, it just makes all the difference.
Okay, very final question. I know that I said that was the last one, but I can't finish this without asking. Gwyneth Paltrow loves you, both of you. You've co-created content. Are you besties?
We're not besties, but we do. We're not besties yet, but we do send a message and it will be received pretty instantaneously. And I think that's just, again, that power of we're in sort of a connected world. And I think, also just doing things that other people would say were sort of cringe, she mentioned Josh in a post not long after he launched his cookbook. And I was like, you need to respond,
We come up to LA all the time, which we do. We love LA. We said next time we're up, we'd love to take you out for dinner. And she said, well, why don't you come over and cook? And we were like, yeah, great. And away it went. And then
you cooked roast beef.
We did. We went over, rang the doorbells, walked past the security guard.
I just love this. I wish this was a gossip podcast because I would be asking all the questions.
It was such an amazing. We went twice in a week. We went one afternoon and cooked and had dinner with her and a couple of her friends, and then the following week we went back and filmed the content, and our boys came over as well, and
she let them go and get some really terrible ice cream with a million toppings on it, and I was like, my God, you're bringing in E-numbers.
That's poison in this house.
E-numbers into Gwyneth's house. She was like, oh, it's fine. I was like, oh my God,
It was just great.
E-numbers, I love that.
Yeah.
And, she loves food and is just so into restaurants and anything and everything to do with food. So,
and she has a good eye because she spotted you too. Hey, thank you both so much for joining me today. Just love hearing your story, love what you do, love the way you run your business, love your restaurants, and just so grateful that you were able to come on today and have a chat.
Thank you, Penny.
Thank you so much.